Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to say thank you to a lot of the journalists who have come out, their live feed, to their Facebook wall. The Chronicle of the White Horse Phelps Media Group is doing a video. There's been a lot of people that have assisted us and contributed along the way. I want to thank Piper Clem and Sissy Wicks. They were the first people to come to us to do a podcast to try to hear a little bit about our perspective of the USEF process. As I said when we, yes, I'm going to do that right now. As I said at the beginning, it takes a village to do a lot of what we do in the legal world. We do not practice law in a vacuum. We had a great legal team. We had Michael Rahm, who's here with us from Fort Lauderdale. We had John Pappas from Chicago, Paul Regensdorf, who I begged, pleaded, and steeled to come into the case because of his legal acumen towards the middle of the case, and myself. We have a lot of respect for the USEF. I do not want anyone to think that we're here to trash the USEF or to talk poorly about them. We happen to represent a group of people, and this is not about Larry Glefke and Kelley Farmer at this point. This is about the process. This is about anybody who reads and picks up the USEF Bible rule book that's about this big. You have to know the rules. You have to understand the rules. And unfortunately, some of those rules don't have a logical conclusion. So for that reason, we as lawyers, I have never really enjoyed going up to the USEF to litigate. I like to win. My record is pretty darn good winning. I don't win up there. We won now, but we don't win up there. We don't win up there because it's a non-winnable place for a lot of reasons. And I hope that through this process we can learn a lot. What I will tell you today is I had a lovely conversation with Murray Kessler over at the Horse Show. We spent 15 or 20 minutes together. Our first opportunity simply by chance to talk. We will say that we are so grateful for the changes that have been made to this point. We are very grateful for the memo that Bill Maroney put out yesterday, which does one of two things. One, it shows you that your organization is going to get a lot better. Two, it shows, despite what you folks may feel, that you should stand up and applaud Larry Glefke and Kelley Farmer. And that's what you should do. They took the time and the money to dig and to realize the things that were happening in their case and to get down to the truth. And we'll have plenty of naysayers, and we're not here to change your mind. We're not here to tell you otherwise, other than let's talk a little bit about the process before I turn it over to Paul. I received a call on January 11, 2017 from Kelley, panic-stricken, crying, heartbroken, that she just received an email like every other membership did, that she was now suspended for something she knew nothing about. I'm going to raise my hand and tell you I wasn't so sure myself that they didn't know about this charge and what was going on. So I sent a bevy of people to their home to pull all of their computers, all of their hard drives. I sent computer experts, lie detector specialists, you name it, to make sure that I could be comforted that they didn't know anything about this charge that had been levied against them that they didn't go to. Once I was comforted and the experts proved to me that they were right, we asked for a rehearing. The USEF gave us a rehearing. We showed them why, and they agreed to not challenge our rehearing. The rehearing came on a lot of different reasons, and some things that you all should really be thinking hard about, which is answering you. The USEF put in some pretty harsh penalty guidelines now. And it is no more a $500 slap on the wrist for a drug violation. It is a very serious offense, and if you're charged, you're going to be sitting out a long time. So for that reason, it was important to go up there and to challenge. And we started the process by asking for a lot of documents, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but more importantly, everything we asked for the most part, we were told no, we can't have. We can't very much defend a case if we can't get the documents that are sitting inside the USEF four walls, folks. If they have the documents, we got to be able to see them. We were constantly denied, 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 denied. We had motions put forth before the hearing committee, which the chairs were the ones to make the decisions, And every single time we asked, they said no. Every single time we went back to them, they said no. Every single time we went back again, they said no. And then they got to the point where they said, seriously, Miss Navin, Mr. Rom, John Pappas, why are you guys making a mountain out of a molehill? Get away from here. You're aggravating us. Words were far harsher than that. But be that as it may, we didn't give up, and I don't take no too kindly. And we continued digging. We asked at the time for a hearing to take place for a period of time. We were told, sorry, you get 6 hours, tough luck. Anyone who's ever tried a case knows a case of this magnitude isn't getting to. Avery's laughing. Avery Chapman, say hello. He's an equine lawyer. He knows you can't litigate a case like this in 6 hours, but okay, fine. That's the way it goes. I wanted to just give you all a description, and there's some folks here that understand this. This is such great artwork. I know y'all want to take a picture of this, but this is really what the hearing room looks like. There's a hearing panel here of your peers, groups from different organizations that, truthfully, in fairness to them, they don't know anything about the case until they walk in the morning of the hearing. They're handed a binder. They're told, here's an hour, read it, and get familiar with what you're about to hear. So God bless them for that. They volunteer, and they have a big task on their hands to listen for a couple days of what's going to happen. Over here at the USEF table, this is important. The USEF has Steve Schumacher. He is the representative who is prosecuting the cases as the client representative. He usually has either an in-house lawyer or Mr. Alan Foreman. Y'all should like Alan Foreman. You paid for him. He's from the USEF. He's hired and retained to fly from Maryland to come in and litigate these cases. Over here is a person named Dan Danford. He's paid for by your membership money. You should like him too, because he's the hearing panel's lawyer. So everybody's entitled to have lawyers. That's why we sit over here, and we have our clients, and we are the lawyers that represent them. So in this room, as you can imagine, these are the only people that are unaffiliated with USEF. And it's a little intimidating to the folks that have to come in and plead their case, but it is what it is. So we came to the hearing panel, and we asked for things, and some of the things we asked for in this case were to bring in certain witnesses. We had, the beauty about the horse business is everybody knows something. It's not 100% sure they might be right, but for the most part they know a lot of things. And we had some tidbits on some information that didn't go so well in our case, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but we asked for some of the technicians from the lab who handled our client samples to come in and testify. And they did not come in and testify because the hearing panel didn't feel that they should leave their job 3 miles away and come in and testify in person about how they handled the sample. I suspect some of those folks on the hearing panel regret that decision, especially after they hear what would have been testified to at that hearing, which is that the USEF technicians contaminated the samples. So they told us, you live with Dr. Ubo. He's going to come in here. He's the pillar, and he's great, and he's going to tell you everything you need to know. And yeah, Dr. Ubo's not with USEF anymore. I'm sure y'all can figure out why. So again, thank you, Larry and Kelley, for exposing those things that happened. So through the process, through the hearing panel, we felt confident that we had proven our case, or thought we did. But I prepared Larry and Kelley quite well to tell them that they were not going to win, that they should expect on June 30th an order that would be lengthy, brutal, horrible, and pretty much calling them every name in the book, and that's pretty much what we got. But that we don't stop there. Okay, I want to thank Michael Rom. Michael Rom worked diligently to dig through the USEF rulebook and find every aspect of getting this case into arbitration. You can love him or hate him, but he got it there, and we started the arbitration process. So we started this process for a reason, and I'm going to say one part here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Paul. A lot of people were offended when we put the hearing transcripts online. We put the hearing transcripts online for a reason. We wanted to see what other people knew out there that we couldn't reach. And sure enough, this is exactly what you would expect. There's really good people in the world, and we got some really good tips, and some really good tips that the technicians had contaminated the samples and buried the information. So with that, I sent an email to the USEF group and I said, certainly this couldn't possibly be true that this happened in your lab and you didn't tell us. And crickets. I don't know how to make cricket noises, but we heard nothing. So on July 17th, I sent another email and I said, this couldn't possibly be true. To which I got, case over, we don't owe you anything else, goodbye. That's not usually good to tell Bonnie Neiman because Bonnie Neiman doesn't take that too kindly. So I'm now going to turn it over to Paul Regensdorf. He's going to tell you a little bit more about where the process went as we learned that information and the legal process. And he's going to talk a little bit more about the science of the drug testing, the green tubes that are used, and why, I think when he's finished talking, you're going to learn why the USEF has made some substantial changes. And then we're going to open the floor to some additional questions. So let us change this over and we'll...
First of all, my name is Paul Regensdorf. I am not a horse lawyer. I don't know diddly squat about horses. I'm going to say things today that are wrong, and I apologize for that. I'm doing the best I can. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing for a very long time. Bonnie brought me in on this case after they gotten their teeth kicked in at the hearing panel to see if I could help them out on the next level up. And so I'm going to tell you about the legal aspect of this case. I may go into too much detail, and I apologize if I do. Just listen up, because if there's something that interests you, just make a note of it. We'll talk about it at the end. The purpose is to tell you what happened, what we think happened, and then we'll let you guys ask questions. The goal originally was to have a couple of representatives of USEF sitting here too, so that they could tell you what they think happened and you could ask them questions too. USEF decided, they're sort of saying that we're looking forward. They're not looking back. They're looking forward to make some changes, and they've made some changes. We kind of have to look back because of some things that happened. Now, first of all, I'm going to talk for a while, it may be an hour. I like to think of it as a happy hour. It's happy for Kelley and Larry. I hope it's happy for all of USEF in the long run. It may not be happy for some other people, but it's also happy hour inside. It's half off drinks until 6 o'clock. So there's my advertisement, so feel free, okay? Happy hour. I have two reasons why I wanted to come here today, and they're not necessarily the same reasons that Bonnie raised with you guys. The first is, I don't like it when my clients get kicked in the groin, especially when there's no reason for them to have been kicked. And the more I got into this case, I determined that that's exactly what happened in this case. And as a result of that, around the water coolers and out by the rings and in the barns, people whisper and people talk, and USEF stirs that up a little bit because they're trying to make their drug enforcement plan look, powerful. And the words cheaters are stated. And I've read some of your blogs online, and I see that said again and again, cheaters. And so we went through this entire case, and we spent a lot of time trying to find out what really happened. And as a result of that, Kelley and Larry have been reinstated to their full and complete USEF membership rights as of the date of the suspension, July 1, 2017. They weren't the cheaters. They got cheated in this case. And I don't like it. And I want to stop people who have been calling them that. I can't stop everybody. Some people will think things forever. But we're going to lay out the story of what happened in this case. And if I go into too much detail, I'm sorry. I get paid to go into detail. I need to say this. I am in this case the storyteller. I'm not the one who shouldn't get the pat on the back. I didn't win this case. The people that won this case were Bonnie, John Pappas, Michael Rahm. They built this case from January through June and into July of 2017. Don't get me wrong, they totally lost in front of the hearing panel. But if they hadn't done that work, this case would never have been brought to light. I came in at the American Arbitration Association stage. It's sort of an appeal. But don't think that you can always go to the American Arbitration Association and turn these things around. We had the perfect storm of events that we were able to utilize to show the weaknesses in the system, to show the problems that USEF has been having, to show the difficulties in their lab. And you've seen some of the things that Mr. Kessler and Mr. Maroney have announced as far as changes. God bless them. All of those things needed to be done, and a lot more. So the first reason I wanted to be here is to tell the story of Kelley and Larry, and tell the story as to why, from USEF's perspective, this was just an isolated incident. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a broad range of problems going back into the middle of 2016. And I'm going to lay them out for you. The second reason I'm here, and I'm going to be gone after today. I won't be back at another USEF event. I've been at your beautiful showgrounds today. I probably won't be back there again. But you guys will. And you're going to be competing tomorrow and the next day, and you're going to be regulated by some organization like USEF when you do that, as is the case. Kelley and Larry think this thing should be regulated. There shouldn't be cheaters out there. But you know something? When USEF says they're going to make changes, they can change the lab technique, they can change the type of tubes they put the blood into when they take the samples. But if USEF doesn't change its approach, its culture of these drug investigations and these drug prosecutions, if they don't change that, you folks are going to be fighting these battles from now on. USEF needs to change its head and how it thinks about these cases. And that's the second reason I'm here. Now, there were two anecdotes that I want to share with you that really brought it home to me, both within the last week. Let me see if I can find them here. The first was a week ago when Bonnie sent me this picture. And this is a picture of Kelley riding a horse. I don't know, just a horse, looking like it's the world's greatest champion in the world. In fact, she won this class. And I said, God, that must be the bestest horse ever because it looks beautiful, and it does. Turns out it's a very good horse, but Bonnie and Larry and Kelley, when they were suspended, they thought, for pretty darn good reason, that their days were toast. They were out for up to 2 years, and who knows how long it would take, if ever, for them to get back into the swing, to be accepted, to have people ask them to ride their horses, train their horses. And so they now work on building their stable with somewhat younger horses, developing them, as opposed to always getting the best rides. Because when Kelley's on the best ride, she's going to win. And I said, darn it, that's just not right. That shouldn't happen. Not because of these allegations. I grew up in Milwaukee in the 50s, and the Milwaukee Braves had just moved there. And they brought with them, when they came, a young right fielder by the name of Henry Aaron, Hammer and Hank, fabulous, fabulous guy in his sport. And I thought back and I said, you know, what if he had been charged with juicing with steroids like Sammy Sosa and Jose Canseco, and he'd been knocked out? What would have happened? How unfair would that have been if he hadn't done it? And that's what happened to Kelley and Larry, and it bothered me. So that's one anecdote, that they should be on the best horses, and they should win not because they're juicing their horses, but because Kelley may be the best rider as a hunter that there is. If she wins, that's why she ought to win. And the second anecdote, Bonnie told me again last week. Kelley was riding into the ring. Woman was sitting next to her. I hope she's not here, and if she is, I'm using you as a very nice example, whoever you are. This woman muttered under her breath, why did they let her back in the ring? Kelley. Meaning, why did they let that cheater back in the ring? And Bonnie, who doesn't take kindly to those things, like I don't, says, whoa, whoa, that's a horsey term. Whoa, hold on. Thank you. It was a cheap joke, but she said, give me 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes. And she told this lady the abbreviated story of Kelley and Larry. And at the end of it, the woman said, oh my goodness, I feel so bad. I apologize. Now, I can't do that with the thousands of USEF members, the people who've been writing the word cheater online. I can't do that. But I can do it here with you folks, and I'd like to try. And it's those two things that got me kind of going to do this. Okay. Let's see where I am on my secret notes here. Okay, here's what I want to try to do. Listen, this is maybe a little boring, and I apologize. First of all, I'm going to give you the chronology of this case, when things happened. And then I'm going to go back and just fill in a few of the blanks as to why there were incredible mistakes made right from the beginning. And they all bore on Kelley and Larry. And not just on whether they got off, because you see, there are people who cheat and then get off because they hire good lawyers, as you've read, or the lawyers get paid a lot of money. That's one group. And then there's people who never cheated, but get caught, or they think they got caught, and they get off because they should have gotten off. And that's the category you will find that Larry and Kelley are in. Interestingly enough, some of you guys might want to ask your association, USEF, ask them how much money they spent prosecuting Kelley and Larry. And whatever number they honestly own up to, I mean, they hired one of the best firms from Colorado to come in. They had lawyers from Maryland. They had lawyers from New York. They had lawyers from Kentucky. Whatever that amount of money is, I personally guarantee you that Michael and Bonnie and I and John would be happy to have taken that amount of money with big smiles on our face, because we didn't outspend them to win this case. We won the case, or at least we got to the point where USEF folded their tents, because we should have. Here's the chronology. Here's what happened. July 28th, 2016. Kelley was riding a horse which coincidentally she was riding today, I believe, named Unexpected. And unexpectedly, the blood sample got drawn on her horse and some others. And what happened to that blood sample is a good chunk of this story. The blood sample goes into a tube like this. It's called a green tiger top tube. Notice the blood in there. I threatened someone that I would pop the top on this and drink it, just to show what a real powerful lawyer I am. Actually, that's actually Bloody Mary mix, but it's the best I could do. The blood goes into these samples on July 28th, these tubes. Didn't get sent to USEF for several days later, early August. We'll talk about what happened in between. It's critical. Early August, USEF receives two sets of samples. They call the A sample and the B sample, a split sample. The A sample they're going to test right now. They're going to see right now to see whether they got a violation. The B sample they're going to do other things with. So the samples come in. They're not frozen at that point. They look like this. The blood looks like that. They're spun down in a centrifuge, which separates the two parts of the blood we'll talk about in a minute. The B sample gets put into a freezer. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the A sample goes ahead and gets tested. And that testing took place in early August on the A sample. And the A sample came back with a value, and the numbers are not that critical, but remember this number, 300, roughly, 300. According to USEF, and we'll talk about this in a minute, according to USEF, anything over 100 is not allowed. This was 3 times that. Bing, red flag goes up. They, meaning USEF, begins the prosecution of Kelley and Larry for this horse for having a sample with GABA, G-A-B-A, to a level of 300. That first round went incredibly quickly. Why? Because Kelley and Larry never got notified. It's pretty easy to win when the other side doesn't show up to fight. And by the end of November, that case was over. They were in the process of being suspended from their organization and from competition on these and other grounds like them. They didn't learn about it until January. In January of last year, at the annual meeting, you'll remember a lot of talk about how we're going to really start cracking down on these people. And the words cheater started to come into people's vocabulary. I don't know that USEF used them, but a lot of USEF members did. And it was stoked by some of the statements that were made by USEF personnel. So the cheaters were now subject to a rehearing, but they were also subject to massive suspensions, 18 months to 2 years. Fortunately, they hired 3 lawyers, Bonnie, Michael, and John. They didn't hire me because I wouldn't have been able to help. I'm not a horsey lawyer. And these guys went to work trying to build their case, requesting information, trying to find out when were the samples tested, who tested them, give us the lab reports, give us the data, give us the names of the people, let us talk to these people. And they basically got nowhere. But the case continued, and they said, all right, we're going to ask you to test the other sample. Remember, there's 2. There's an A and a B sample. They said, we want you to test the B sample. The other one, it's still sitting in a freezer somewhere. Normally, what people do is they say, well, we don't trust you, Yusuf. You've already hung us once with the A sample. Send it out to the lab in California or somewhere else. Let them test it. These guys made perhaps the smartest call. They said, okay, Yusuf, you think we did something wrong? You think so from your first sample? Test it again. Test the B sample and see if you can, quote, substantially confirm the results of the A sample. We're going to talk some science in just a few minutes. On March 9th, the USEF lab pulled the frozen B sample out of the freezer to do the confirmatory test. What happened on March 9th and March 13th and March 15th was a complete laboratory catastrophe that was hidden from us, certainly hidden from all of you, and the cheater story continued. I'll tell you about it in detail in a few minutes, but basically they first tested it, and instead of a 300, they got a value of 2,400. 2,400. Nobody to this day, except our experts, could explain why. They did some machinations. They tried to figure out what the heck is, they didn't tell us about that number. They did some more things, and then they retested the blood again on March 15th, as though they had never tested it on March 9th. Now it came up with 1,800. Still massively different than the first one. Unheard of, scientifically impossible. That number they reported to Michael and to Bonnie and to John and said, well, I guess it substantially confirms that there's a lot of GABA in there. I mean, come on. That's what they said. And the tests continued, the proceedings continued. These guys went out and hired some of the best people. Bruce Goldberger at University of Florida, Terry, what's the guy, Schultz? Ted Schultz. I mean, they got Amanda up at the University of Cincinnati. I hate to think of the money they spent doing that. And I hate to think you guys might have to do that someday, but they did. And the experts said, this is crazy. Something went wrong with that sample. It had to. Nothing can make a sample go from 300 to 2,400 and 1,800 unless the sample is completely wrong, or it's the wrong horse or something. But USEF pressed on, gave them very little information. They went to the hearing in June 6th and 7th, a 2-day hearing. Not a lot of time. It may seem like it, but it wasn't. And of course, they got hammered. Ruling on June 30th, you lose. You're cheaters. They never used the word cheaters, but that's what they said. And then more information started to get in to Bonnie. God, Bonnie's just a bulldog. Don't ever have her on the other side. That's why I've always worked with her. She worked with me in a couple of different firms. I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to have her on the other side. She feels the same way about me. And she's right. We heard that there was some kind of a catastrophe in the lab. Nothing. We didn't get told anything. We were blown off. So I think it was Michael's idea, but whoever it was, not to go to the court in New York, which you can do. They went to American Arbitration Association arbitration and got a lawyer out of Coral Gables named Lawrence Sychek. I have good things to say about that man as an arbitrator, but I don't think he's a horsey guy. He's just a lawyer. I think he's a real estate lawyer, but he's a trained arbitrator. He's trained to look into these things. And Bonnie gave me a call and said, Paul, I got a tough case. Can you come help me on this arbitration? Well, an arbitration like this is tough. You don't just go in there and try to prove your case again. You've tried your case. It's sort of like you're stuck with what you got. Can you win with that? And I looked at the case and I said, these numbers make no scientific sense. I've got a little bit of scientific background. If you guys do, you know that for a test to be a scientifically reliable test, you must be able to reproduce the results. Someone else doing the same test on the same materials under the same circumstances should come up with the same numbers if the test is valid. And I said, this is crazy. The same test on the same blood came out 6 to 8 times higher. I said, Mr. Sychek will never accept that. Well, I was wrong. We had a quick hearing on August 15th. I'd been in the case for 4 days. We did our best. We put on what information we had. And he said, I'm just not convinced. He said, I'm a little bit troubled by this, but I'm just not convinced you're going to win at our final hearing. So I'm not going to grant you a temporary injunction type hearing. We said, okay. I thought we were toast. I thought we were dead. But we kept asking Mr. Sychek for the information, for the documents that these guys had tried so hard to get and been shut down by the hearing panel. We kept trying, we kept trying, we kept trying. Finally, in October, we got the right to take the depositions under oath, sworn testimony of the 3 lab personnel and Dr. Schumacher. Yeah, about October 11th, I think. Like I said, it was October 19th. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that. And that began to tell us a lot of the story. And then just before Thanksgiving, I got the distinct pleasure and joy of taking Dr. Clarence Ubo's deposition for about 6 or 8 hours. And when we got done with that deposition, I said to the USEF lawyers, I said, Dr. Ubo was going back to Nigeria for a holiday. He's going to come back. Holiday. He was going back for a funeral. He spends that part of the year in Nigeria. I said, when he comes back, guys, he's not going to be your lab director anymore, based on what we just learned. Well, he was. He came back and he was our lab director. But based on the information we learned, we filed with the arbitrator a series of motions asking for specific relief, and again, asking Mr. Sychek, the arbitrator, to put Kelley back in the ring, because we're going to win when we have the trial, finally. So why waste time now? And we argued that, USEF fighting us every inch of the way. They never acknowledged that we were right, despite the fact they knew everything by that time. And on January 3rd, Mr. Sychek wrote a very short order and simply said, well, I've looked at this again and we've seen a lot more information. And you know something? I think Kelley and they are going to win. So I'm going to put them back in the ring right now. And that's why they're in that ring now. Except for the fact now they've thrown out the entire case and they're back full-time forever. And that's what happened in the case. And at that point, well, now we've resolved the case. We don't have to go ahead and fight the case, the hearing in February. So what I'd like to do now, that's the chronology. July 28th to January 3rd of 2018. 18 months, 12 of which they were under, Kelley and Larry were under a big black cloud. The cheaters were under a black cloud. Today, I hope we can pull that cloud away and tell you what happened. To do that, let's see what I've missed here. Probably too many things. Now I'm skipping pages. You'll be happy. Okay. What I'm going to tell you now is, contrary to what USEF has told you, these were not isolated. This was not an isolated event. This was not just a lab event. This was not just a simple mistake of somebody in a laboratory who caused a problem. This was a series of endemic, deep-seated problems with USEF's drug program. So here's what I want to do. I want to talk first a nickel's worth of science. Maybe you all know this, maybe you don't. But again, let's assume that rather than being Bloody Mary mix, let's assume that this is blood. What color is it? Somebody. Thank you. It's red. But it's not, because blood is not red. And you're saying I've been drinking, right? Okay, I had a beer, but that's all. Blood is not red. Blood is clear. The serum, the liquid in blood, looks like that. Virtually, completely clear. When Youssef decided it was going to test GABA and penalize people for illegal amounts of GABA, and we could go hours showing you why the original basis for prosecuting people for GABA was completely flawed. But I don't want to waste your time, so I've got more exciting things to talk about. The person who set up the testing for GABA realized that to get consistent testing from horse to horse to horse to horse, you've got to get the blood down to the plasma, the clear liquid. That's what's in blood. The stuff that makes blood red are the red blood cells, the little corpuscles, little donut-shaped cells that have a membrane around them and contain a whole bunch of material that's not in GABA. And if you take this tube, assuming this was blood, and spin it down, put it in a centrifuge and spin it down, high speed, all the blood cells settle to the bottom of the tube, and the clear plasma rises to the top. And you see this little clear thing at the bottom, this little light-colored piece at the bottom of the tube? That's a silicone separator. It's magic. If you take this blood sample fresh within the first 4 hours, put the blood in there, put it into a centrifuge, spin it, the red blood cells go below the silicone separator, down here, then there's the silicone separator, and then there's a clear tube of colorless liquid above. And that is what is supposed to be tested. It's that simple. In this tube, it's called a green tiger top tube. Now, in fact, they used the wrong tubes, and I'll explain why in a minute. But the first thing you do when you get blood like this, drawn from the horse on July 28th, is you don't put it in a freezer. You don't freeze this blood. Why? Have you ever put water into an ice cube tray and see what happens when it freezes? What happens? It expands. The ice cubes rise a little bit in the ice cube tray because water expands, fluid expands when it freezes. If you freeze whole blood like this, all those blood corpuscles, the red blood cells, some of them start to expand as they freeze, and then when they thaw, they rupture. Some of them do anyway. The more you freeze, the more you rupture them. That's called hemolysis. Hemolysis means that now, what used to be inside the red blood cells has been ripped open and spilled into the clear plasma, contaminating the plasma with all the stuff that was in the red blood cells. Now, Dr. Ubo said, well, what difference does it make? It all comes from the same horse. Who cares? Well, if you don't know any better, maybe nobody cares. But if you know better, as our experts did, they say, no, 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 no. Because red blood cells contain different things than plasma does. And that's why you keep the plasma separate from the red blood cells. And you test these. The best guess, and nobody knows for sure yet, the science isn't quite there, is that the red blood cells contain between 6 and 14 times more GABA than the plasma. So if the red blood cells get ripped open and dump some of their materials into the plasma, guess what happens to the GABA concentration? Up. And that's precisely what happened in August of 2016, because the veterinarian, by mistake or otherwise, didn't get the right instructions or didn't know what to do, but she put the samples, blood samples, in the freezer and froze them. So that when they came to the lab, thawed out again, having now gone through one freeze-thaw cycle, they were partially hemolyzed. Oh, thank you, my assistant. I'm going to show this to the camera just for a minute. This is a super scientific chart. It really looks remarkably simple. It's a hemolysis chart. And it's used to try to tell how much hemolysis there is in blood. On this side, you can see the liquid is almost clear. It's slightly pale yellow, like very, very light yellow urine, but less. And the more hemolysis, or blood cells that rupture, dumping their contents into the blood, the more hemolyzed the blood is. So in August, after having been frozen once, the blood was somewhat hemolyzed. Our experts said that's their opinion. Now, they didn't take any pictures. USEF didn't take any pictures of that. So you might say, hey, Regenserv, how do you know that it really was hemolyzed, even though your experts said so? Well, because eventually, we got from USEF the things that they didn't give us during the hearing panel period from January until June. We didn't get them until October, finally. October 11th. I think that was the October 11th date. Thank you. I knew there was an October 11th date. October 11th of 2017. We got the rest of the pictures. Because here's what happened. I don't want to get too technical, but this is how you build the case. When they took that blood out of the freezer, let me back up. Now, when they took the blood out of the freezer on March 9th, if they'd looked at it, they would have seen that the plasma was somewhat hemolyzed already. It had now been frozen for 6 more months, and it was going to be thawed again. 6 more months at like 80 degrees below zero or something. When this blood was really frozen, it was going to be tremendously hemolyzed. So they let it thaw out on March 9th, and then for some reason they shook it or vortexed it or maybe even spun it again, and guess what happened? The silicone seal gave way, failed, and no longer separated all of the blood cells from all of the plasma. Why? Because USEF was using the wrong kind of tubes. These tubes are really good to be used once. Fresh blood, put the fresh blood put in here, put it in the centrifuge, separate the clear plasma from the red blood cells, draw the plasma off of the red blood cells so it can never be contaminated again, and put that somewhere else. But they didn't do that. They used this tube, froze it the first time, froze it again when it got back to the lab, centrifuged it again, twice, 3 times. Each time, this silicone separator is not designed to do that. The manufacturer of the tube specifically tells users, do not do that. These tubes are not designed for that. But that's what USEF did. It may have happened as many as 40 or 50 other times. They admitted to us, 40 or 50 other times. And they never reported that during the lab process, never. They didn't report ours to anyone. The blood, when it came out of that mistake, was so mixed up, they used the word homogenized. How many of you hear that word from time to time, homogenized? The older people do here because milk used to be called homogenized milk. That was the process where they shake it up until all the fat in the milk stay together and it doesn't separate anymore. This was so mixed up, the blood was homogenized. Now they tried to spin it down, but when they spin it down, remember, all of the chemical contents of the cells have been spilled into the liquid and mixed in the liquid. When you spin it down, the only thing that spins down and separates are the solid materials, the cells, the cell membranes, the cellulose material, the hard material. You can't get the GABA out of the blood plasma once it's mixed in there. So after they discovered that on March 9th, they had a tremendous problem. Did they report it? No. Did they?
Before you go too much further, let me add something to that.
Bonnie wants to add something. Who thinks we should let her? No, if my wife says yes.
I just want to add a little something here because I think it's important, and I kind of owe Jimmy Toronto this paper to see. The green top tubes, I don't want to go too far past this right now. It's such an egregious mistake, and I will pass around. This is the manufacturer warning for this particular day, for this particular tube, and it says very clearly, if you're going to use this tube, you must centrifuge within 2 to 4 hours. Our people are holding samples 4 and 5 days without centrifuging. It says you cannot freeze in this tube, and they're freezing in this tube. If I'm somebody that's had a prior violation, I'm pretty upset right now. if you used a green top tube. I'll leave it at that. I'm going to pass this around for people to see. But this was free on the internet for anybody to see, and I should not have had to dig through to find it to prove that this tube should never have been used.
So they used the wrong tubes. And as a result of that, they had a catastrophic failure on March 9th that nobody in the lab told anybody about. Not only did they not tell anybody, they violated every lab procedure in the world. They didn't write it down. You look through the lab notes for March 9th, you wouldn't see any reference to this problem at all. Silence. Silence. A representative of the legal department was there to watch this because, remember, this was Kelley and Larry. They were going after the big guys. They were trying to make headlines for their drug program on this case. They had a lawyer there to verify that everything was done properly. And that lawyer did sign an affidavit that everything was done properly on March 9th. Hello? Impossible. We didn't learn that for months.
That was Sandlow. Attorney, they asked you which
I'm sorry, Attorney Sandlow. Sando. I don't know that she knew any better. I'm not blaming her. But whoever put that affidavit out there, they knew better. That was on March 9th. They came out with 2,400. I mean, they should have just said, this test is over, because the rules of USEF are very clear. If the B sample does not substantially confirm the A sample results, the prosecution is over. That's simple. Did USEF drop this prosecution on March 9th? Raise your hand if you think they did. Right. Why not? I don't know, but they didn't. If you took a little bit of basic science, and I am a skilled college chemistry major for 1 year, who's chuckling? Thank you. You remember the difference between qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis? Qualitative analysis is the test to just determine the presence or absence of something. You want to see if sugar's in something, you do a test, oh, there's sugar in there. That's qualitative. The USEF lab was only certified to do qualitative testing for GABA. Is it present or not? But in order to regulate GABA, since you and I all have GABA in our bodies, and every horse on these grounds has GABA in its body, naturally, they had to find some way to determine what amount of GABA is above the normal range so that we could penalize you if you pump GABA into your horse above the normal range. A very complicated calculus that they had to go through, and they did a horrible job doing it. But to do that, you'd have to know the exact number of the percentage, the nanograms of GABA in the concentration of the fluid. Their lab wasn't even certified or qualified to do that. But they came out with 2,400 and they went, holy crap, what are we going to do now? So what they did was on the 13th of March, the same lab chemist, who also is no longer with USEF, as we told them he would not be, he was given the task of running a super secret experiment, and he went in the back. Nobody was with him. It wasn't videotaped. There was no observer. And he took a couple of old samples and tried to duplicate the process to see if the test could be duplicated that he had just failed over with our horse. And he came back and said, yeah, same thing happened there, so it's okay. So they went ahead and assumed that it was valid to continue testing. Our experts at the time, we didn't know what had happened, but they said, no, something's wrong with that sample. They tested it again. They added a couple of other, they're the horsey people, a couple of other calibrators, which is a technical thing that allows you to get a more accurate count, and came out with a number 1,800, still bizarrely above. It doesn't confirm anything except that their lab is incapable of performing reasonable scientific experiments and diagnoses. And off it went. And so what we have is not just a situation where on March 9th there was a catastrophe, that isolated one-time incident. No. We have a situation where from the beginning we have an organization that has a distinctly under-regulated process of collecting samples, regulating the vets, teaching the collecting vets what to do, getting a report back so that you learn what the collecting vet does. Their own lawyer did an affidavit twice for this collecting vet saying she froze the blood. I mean, you don't get much better than that. I want to make a little bit of a comment about my second concern, which is going forward for you people in USEF in the future. And that deals with sort of the culture of this drug program. This drug program is like a prosecutor, like a state criminal prosecutor. Their job is to prosecute offenses, and it's an important job. But you know something? Being a criminal prosecutor is one of the toughest jobs in the legal world, and I'll tell you why. Because being a criminal prosecutor, you've got two jobs. The first job, USEF does pretty well, and that is they aggressively fight to prosecute people who've done something wrong. And a prosecutor should do that. If a prosecutor has a solid case, the prosecutor should go forward strongly against that person and make that person pay the price, whatever it is. And Kelley thinks that, and Larry thinks that. And I think most of you guys think that. You want to compete hard, and you want to win, but if you lose, you want to lose to somebody who competed fair and square. That's the first job of the prosecutor. The second job of the prosecutor is the hardest part of the job. Because when you are given the awesome responsibility to prosecute somebody, to take away their liberty, their freedom to compete, their freedom to enjoy their sport for a period of time, and that's the power you give USEF. You give them the power to take away your freedoms if they think you cheated. The second power of a prosecutor is that when they start to have doubts or hear questions about their prosecution, their job is to look into that case twice as hard. And that's the tough part. Because while they're charging hard to prosecute somebody, they also have to be alert to warnings about the validity of the case that they have. And I got to tell you, the culture of the USEF drug prosecution at present has no second part. Because Bonnie and Michael and John kept saying, wait a minute, something was wrong with these samples. Check the samples. Did you run an experiment? There must be more records than this. We heard you tested the A sample again. When did you do that? And they never, to our knowledge, they never went back and started doing an introspective look at that prosecution. It's a tough, tough job. But think about it, folks. We have not learned anything new about this case since November 22nd, when I finished Dr. Ubo's deposition. We knew everything then that we know now. Everything. What did USEF do on November 22nd, or 23rd, or 24th? Did they introspectively look at their prosecution to say, wow, we know what happened now. We know about the catastrophe on the 9th. We know that it was hidden. We know that it was never disclosed. We know that there was hemolysis and freezing back then. Did they do that? No. We had to file motions. They filed a response objecting to the relief to let Kelley and Larry back in the ring. And we had to file a reply. We had a hearing. They argued against this. And then Mr. Sychek said, you know, I think you guys are going to win. I'm putting Kelley in the ring right now. And then USEF reacted. Thank them for doing that. Thank them for making some of the technical changes, getting a new lab director, maybe a new lab, getting new lab personnel, getting new tubes, although I think they may still be using the green tiger top tubes. Remember that name if it ever happens to you. That's good. They're making some technical changes. But I think, realistically, the change that needs to be made is inside their heart, in the prosecution's team, and inside their head. It's the ethos, it's the culture of that program. Because prosecute hard, absolutely. But prosecute fairly. I mean, I don't know how many times Kelley's had a horse in the ring. She's being tested darn near every single time. What does that tell you? This is after they know that she was not a cheater. Why is she being tested every single time? Now, they can. It's legal. They can test everybody in this room every single time. They don't have time to do that. Has their ethos changed? Has the culture changed there? let's talk about the hearing panel. I understand we have one of the hearing panel members here, and I'm not speaking about you, whoever you are, because I don't know who you are. The hearing panel at USEF is a real problem, the way it's set up. I'm speaking from the outside. I'm a lawyer. I go into court. I do appeals. I argue before multi-judge panels. I expect those 3 judges to not give a rat's ass about who wins and who loses. They're going to call balls and strikes and decide who wins, period. And if the judge has a dog in the hunt or a horse in the race, they're going to step out of that case and say, I can't decide this case. I'm too close to it. And they're bringing somebody else. That's the judge you want. The hearing panel in your system are your judges. And I have to tell you, folks, when you look at the way your hearing panel is set up, some of that organization is so tight with the prosecutor's office, with the Drug and Medication Committee now rolled into the Vet Committee. It's like the left hand and the right hand of the same person. Your hearing panel are your judges. They need to judge your case fairly. And if they can't, you can't just allow that system to keep going. Because as Bonnie says, when she went up there, she knew she was going to lose. And she did. Because hearing panels are candidly, some of the members are really tightly wired to the prosecution. It's just not right.
All right, I'm going to add those up here.
I'm done.
Hold on, no, you're not done.
Oh.
I will agree. So I want to go back a little bit to the hearing panel issue. This is an issue that is near and dear to us because some of the hearing panel folks wrote some pretty scathing comments about us as the lawyers. So it's a little personal maybe, but if you were to go back and look at the 2017 town hall where they were talking about the hearing panel and what do we do in the hearing panel, I see some people smiling because they saw the 22nd portion there. Well, I'm going to say it, I don't care. It was the hearing panel committee chairman. The hearing panel chairman told the USEF membership that, and let me see if I can get the exact words, we know that Dr. Schumacher does a really good job in his investigation. So we know when he brings a case in the room, something really happened. Okay, guess what, guys? Avery, how do you feel about that? Come on, Avery.
So we met with Dr. Schumacher for another organization, and we have some significant concerns about his credibility.
Yeah. And why? I'll tell you why. Folks, listen here. If I've got to start 20 steps behind when I'm in that hearing room because they already feel, and not all of them, I'm speaking of one person particularly here, but when they feel that those people are right, we have 20 steps of a hurdle to get over. And that is just not the rules. The rules say you get an unbiased panel. When your Drug and Medication Committee chair or member is the chair of your hearing panel, they're making the rules, they're prosecuting the rules, they're on every single decision in our case, okay? You gotta raise your hand and recuse yourself. That is just something that should not happen. And when we're given documents that say that the prosecutor, Mr. Foreman, is also the attorney for the Drug and Medication Committee, the same person who's deciding our case, it's not okay. It's not okay, folks. So we were not able, we tried hard as we could to get that person off the panel, we couldn't. So a little bit about, Paul skipped over a little bit, I want to go back to something. We asked the hearing panel, he does that, he's getting up there, he forgets things, but we asked the hearing panel, please let us talk to the technicians, the people that touched the samples. And we were told, you don't need that, you don't need to talk to them. Well, guess what? The first time they testified under oath, the first question I asked of the gentleman who made the mistake is I said, where on this piece of paper did you document the mistake? And he looked at me with his eyes wide open and he said, I didn't. I said, why didn't you document it? I didn't think I had to. Well, what did you do about it? I don't know, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. Okay, folks, I don't know who else in this room had the 49 other times, but I'm sorry for you that we didn't catch it then. They also testify that they run bad blood, hemolyzed blood all the time. We're running hemolyzed blood all the time.
Boy, I'm sorry to some of the people I helped in this room because I would have fought differently for you if I had known that. Because it's just wrong. So these are things that we would have learned on June 30th at the hearing panel if the hearing committee would have granted us the right to have the technicians come in the room. But instead they told us Dr. Ubo is so trustworthy. He's going to come in here and he's amazing and he's this expert and he's going to tell us everything that happened. And he walked in that room and he testified, and he didn't testify honestly because we asked him at the time where the rest of the photos were from the inspection of the attorney, and he said, I think his words were, ma'am, you think we would not give you everything? Yeah, we gave you everything. Well, once we got into the arbitration, guess who got another 20-something photos? Oh, and by the way, it was the contaminated photos. The photos they had that they didn't bother to give us. Dr. Ubo, the greatest expert that the hearing panel just thought was amazing, lied right to their face. So I'm a little bitter about that. A little bitter about the fact that this could have all ended on June 30th and saved people a lot of money. But unfortunately, the hearing panel needs to do better about thinking, why would these lawyers come up here and argue in front of us for days if they didn't have something to say? Well, lawyers don't go in and do that. If somebody's wrong, you plead your case and you get out. We learned through the process that through depositions with Dr. Schumacher that there is no legislative process. Can anyone here tell us who gets to decide what drug goes on the ban list? Come on, anybody? Anybody? Dr. Schumacher, nobody else. He gets to decide if a drug goes on the list, if it's banned or not. He gets to make that determination. Folks, you got to do something better. You got to make sure that this group looks at the research. Should this drug be banned? Why should it be banned? Who's doing the research? Why is that research being done? Before you just go and think something's bad for a horse. There was a lot of issues with that came through the process. I assumed, I think a lot of you did assume, that if you put a drug on the ban list, it's because it's gone through a series of events to get there. I was shocked when I learned that that's not how it works. Targeting. I want to talk a little bit about targeting because that's something that I'm really bent about. Some of the things we never got to bring up, just because the case resolved, is Larry and Kelley's sample was pulled on July 28th. The positive was called on September 22nd. The system works like this. If there is positives in the lab, it goes to a little office in Ohio. And then one person looks at those positives and decides what to do about them. Yes, Dr. Schumacher again. So he gets to decide who gets a letter and who doesn't get a letter, and then it goes to the next person. But that's your barometer right there. So I was a little shocked because when the paperwork goes to Dr. Schumacher, he's not supposed to know who that person is. So he looks at some redacted entry blanks. So when I asked for the redacted entry blank for Kelley and Larry's case, I was utterly shocked. Everything was redacted except for, let's try this is a great game, stabled with Lane Change Farm. Anyone here know anyone else called Lane Change Farm? I don't think so. Who's the emergency contact? Debbie Buchanan. Anyone else know who Debbie's worked for in the last 20 years? So who didn't know that that entry blank belonged to Larry and Kelley? Come on, guys. And guess what day it was stamped as received by Youssef? 16 days before the positive was called. Come on, guys. 16 days they were pulling entry blanks before the positive was even called. And you don't want to think targeting's happening out there? Folks, we know it's happening. We know people are getting targeted. We know it's happening over and over. There's people who get to decide. We learned in this case that people can call down from Ohio and give tag numbers to test, specific tag numbers. That's not supposed to happen. So the reason why all of this is happening, why Dr. Ubo's not there anymore, sorry panel members, he wasn't a great honest person, because he hid and he buried this information. When I asked him under oath in that hearing panel room, why were 2 tests done and what happened. He never mentioned the bogus experiment. He never mentioned anything about it. In fact, he actually said something completely different. So that was his opportunity to tell the truth. Why isn't the lab technician there anymore? Because he testified under oath that the same thing that happened here happened 49 other times. I'm still getting kicked in the shin for that because I probably was more. And I asked why he reported it this time. You know what his answer was? Well, this is the only time I ever handled a B sample, so I figured I should tell somebody. Great. He told Dr. Ubo, who didn't bother to tell anyone. We took the deposition of the quality assurance person. He's the police of the lab, and I asked him, did you know about this? He said, I found out about it a couple days after it happened. I said, so did you report it? Nope, I didn't write it down. Why didn't you write it down? I just didn't. Folks, this is your lab. These are the people that are making decisions in your life. So you can see why the aggravation was happening and why we were upset and why these changes are happening. And the staff changes, I assume, are happening over at the lab. The only reason why we got where we got, the only reason why we learned what we learned, is because Larry and Kelley gave us the go-ahead to keep digging. They didn't quit. I'm not going to tell you that there weren't times they wanted to quit and they wanted to just walk away, but we kept saying, just give us time. So there's so much more we learned. I mean, we're certainly not, we don't have the ability to tell you everything or think about everything, but let's open the floor to some questions. I know people have questions, and Sissy gets the first question since she's raising her hand.
Are you aware of the fact that Dr. Ubo was terminated by the state of Pennsylvania just prior to being hired by the USCF?
Yes, and we know why.
So, do you know who hired him at USCF?
I believe it's in his deposition, but I just don't remember off the top of my head. It wasn't the higher-ups, it was on the lab level.
Maybe Dr. Schumacher?
Oh, okay.
Mr. Maroney hired him.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
Okay, I read that part.
Question number 2 is, didn't everybody have an NDA on this? Why are we able to talk about this now when there were all these non-disclosures?
There were, first of all, there were some issues. There was more of an agreement of non-disclosure and then some issues with the arbitrator. Once the case was resolved, we had some provisions in place and words were slipped and confidentiality got lifted. So that's why we're here.
USCF violated it and therefore you were able to...
You know, we say they did, they say we did. I'm not really sure. It's probably a draw for the way, if you ask them, they say we did it. If you ask them, they said they did it, but they spoke first. That's all I'm going to say.
Because at the USCF annual meeting, all they said to us, including USHA, everybody involved, was that no one could speak on this, that there was a gag order and no one could talk to anybody else about it, and the facts would never, in fact, come out. So that has all changed.
Well, I think it came at the thanks of the Chronicle. They got some quotes that stepped on some toes, and I think Deloise Noble Strong posted a video that stepped on some toes. So we knew, and we did our research to find out who said what, and we felt confident. We gave the USF the opportunity to file an injunction to stop us from here today for talking, and they didn't file it. So that's why we're here.
Pennsylvania, that USF hired him.
I'm going to stay away from that.
Okay. Obviously, something that he shouldn't have been.
You can go to go to the racetrack. You can look there.
Yeah. I'm going to stay away from that just because it's up to USF to do their due diligence. I did mine for litigation.
Lonnie, would you explain to everybody from day one? We have asked the Chronicle, we have asked Plaid Horse, we have asked every human being that they could come. Did we not ask the Chronicle?
Yes,
to come
and
every
just
day?
in
From
fairness
every day,
to
we
that-
have never said that we
Yeah.
could not do this.
In fairness to that, from the beginning, I know Ann called us, I know Sissy, I know the folks at My Horse Pro, that's now Horse Authority. They actually called and asked if they could come to the hearing in June, and we said, absolutely, come on. And USF would not let them in the room. So we had nothing to hide. Win or lose, it was whatever it was going to be. That's what it was in the back.
So what are they telling you? Are they cleaning up the labs? Are they fixing what went wrong?
Well, I had a very nice conversation with Mr. Kessler today, and the truth is they're really trying hard to do the right thing now, okay? Mr. Kessler's looking at it. They're looking to see if they should even be in the lab business. They're bringing in independent auditors, letting them go through the lab and figure out. I mean, obviously part of it is what are they going to find if it was never documented? So I don't know, but I believe, and I think he's done a very good job putting Tom O'Mara in charge of looking into that stuff. He's a good businessman, and they're going to decide whether or not this should be done independently or not.
Uninvolved third party.
Yeah.
No gain, no loss.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question was, for those that had asked, is what are they going to do about this? What are they doing now in change of this? You know, listen, I did not know, and I'll be honest with you, when you all sign your entry blank, you're saying that you're waiving any litigation against any USEF affiliate or organization. The lab is owned by USEF, so if the lab screws up, you're agreeing you can't sue the lab. Now, I don't know anybody here that knew that. We thought that it was a separate organization for the longest time. We spent a lot of time, because they're in Kentucky, they're getting Kentucky tax breaks. We just assumed it was a separate entity. Little did we know, until I tried to talk to Dr. Schumacher and Ubo early in the investigation when I got slapped down by the USEF council, that that's their employees and that's their lab. We didn't know. We just assumed it was separate. So.
What about the samples that are being taken now? In the last month, they've been here tested every week. Where are those samples going?
Well, listen, I'm with you on that. I mean, I don't like the fact that if the pipeline hasn't been fixed, why are you putting them through the pipeline and why are you freezing samples that shouldn't be in these tubes? But I guess when we get the next positive, somebody's going to be calling.
They should be wearing gloves and they're not.
Exactly. I have advocated for people to videotape everything. Some of the things that happened last week, some of the things that happened last week, one of the techs took the labels off and put them on his arm, and then peeled them off his arm to put them over the lab stoppers. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, we all know that can leak through your skin. So all I can tell you is video, so we have something to prove if we get a contamination or we think it's a contamination. Yes.
I was just going to say, this is maybe more for Larry and Kelley, but have you guys or would you recommend changes to your kind of like horse care routine other than videoing to prevent something like this?
Well, it's funny because, okay, so Anne has asked, are you recommending changes in your horse routine? And it was kind of funny because Paul's never been to the horse show before, so I walked him through the barns and he was like, I can touch any of these horses. I could hand him anything I want. And yeah, so I can tell you, for Larry and Kelley's barn, there's cameras not only obvious, but there's cameras in that back barn buried in places you're never going to know they're in there. So if you're going through their barn, we've got people that are watching 24 hours a day on infrared in their barns. And I just don't know why somebody hasn't set up a system in place to have a business of surveillance at the horse shows, because it needs to be done that way. But hold on, Jimmy is next.
I have two questions. The people that come and test our horses, are they randomly drug tested? How do we know they haven't done something before they test our horses?
Yes, Jimmy Toronto has asked the question is, do we have any knowledge if the people who are doing the testing are drug tested themselves? We have no knowledge of that. I mean, obviously, Jimmy, we assume that veterinarians are licensed in the state. They're not going to expose people like that, but we have no knowledge.
My second question is, did you all invite USEF here to join us?
Yes, just so you know, as of Mr. Kessler sitting with me over at the high performance ring, I asked him if he was here for the meeting, and he said no. And again, understand, folks, if you represent a corporation, you want to proceed forward and you want to present, we're going to fix things. And I do believe, and I felt, this is the first time I've sat down with Mr. Kessler since this case started. And I felt confident that he wants to do the right thing now, that they know what the problems are, and we've given them a roadmap and a blueprint of where the problems are.
It'd be kind of smart of all of us as competitors over there to go to USEF and say, we want an injunction against you or something, that you can't test us until you change things?
Well, Patty Harnway asked the question that she wants to know, can't we as USEF members get some form of injunction to stop the drug testing, at least at this juncture? Here's my answer to that. Their sandbox, their rules. Go get a new organization. Folks, that's what you have to do.
So you have to wait till this process happens all over again to prove you didn't do anything.
Right, that's why I'm telling everybody, video, video, video. Bill?
What about all these people that have, and I know a lot, I know people in their life that they didn't do anything, what recourse do they have now?
I knew that question was coming, and right now every case is a different case. But and we're looking at all those different cases of everybody that has been affected with GABA. We're looking at their individual cases. The one case that just pops off the top of my head is Bridget Colvin's case. Bridget's vet froze her blood, was the same vet as our vet. And we actually used her affidavits to prove, because they tried to claim that it was a Scrivener's error, that the vet really didn't put it in the freezer. But we got all the emails between the vet and the lawyer, and the lawyer said, make the changes, do whatever. And then they came back to us and said, well, we just think that was a Scrivener's error. And I said, well, then how do you explain Bridget's affidavits from 3 years ago from the same vet who froze it? That's not a Scrivener's error. So if I were looking at the first case, it'd probably be ours. But a lot of people got affected in this process. There's a long, Paul talked about, we can't go into the whole history on GABA. We've proven GABA is ineffective. It doesn't do what they claim it does. They have absolutely no scientific evidence. They poo-pooed our experts, really just talked down of the experts that were at our hearing that actually were part of real studies that proved that GABA didn't have that effect. So that's a battle for another day. But one of the things I thought was interesting from the hearing committee panel stuff at our hearing, Mr. Foreman stood up and told the hearing panel that all the racing associations banned GABA, and they're running GABA all over. I did a public records request to every single racing organization in the United States. Can anyone even remotely say how many racehorses have been tested for GABA in the United States? Zero. Anybody? Zero. Not one penny has been spent in the Racing Association to ban GABA. Yeah, the FBI also wrote us an email saying that they did not have thresholds on GABA and they were not running tests for GABA. And until they got an international threshold, GABA also is not tested or wasn't banned at the time by the FBI. Another thing not told to the hearing panel, in fact, they told the hearing panel that the FBI also does this. That was untrue. They told in the hearing panel that they test every sample here for GABA. That was untrue. That we proved to be untrue. So it was a lot of effort to prove the things, but I don't fault the hearing panel, because how are they going to try to figure out who knows what on these things that they're being told? They were being told, stand in line with FBI and the racing associations, and this is bad stuff, and they had to believe that. They didn't have anything to go against. In the back?
How did you guys end up in arbitration? Because you filed a complaint with the USOC?
Well, let me kind of go a little bit, and this is Michael Rahm's brainchild. I'll steal his thunder for a moment. Michael kept saying, USOC 9, USOC 10, this and that. There's a little rule in the rule books called the USEF 10, okay? What that is you can, we went for the USOC 10 ahead of time, and we did that for a reason, because we could not get the hearing co-chairs to give us any documents. I mean, they stonewalled us every step of the way. And so finally we went to the USOC, and they said, no, you're not, you're in the wrong place right now, okay? Go back and do the USEF 10, which I never knew that existed. Michael found it. And what that says is you can actually file in the USEF that they're not following their own rules. Patty, this fits in with what you were saying. And that they have to have an opportunity to rectify their own violation. But you're also, it's the same hearing committee. So you're basically saying, the hearing committee isn't giving us documents, can you please put it back in front of the hearing committee and ask them to give us documents? So we knew we had a problem. So the USOC ruled partly in our favor. They said, you don't belong here yet, go back down there, and then they put in the ruling, but USEF, you better have a separate independent panel for them. We just never got there because that doesn't get you it wasn't going to get Larry and Kelley back in the ring at that point. We needed to focus on getting them back in the ring. But I think the USEF, probably through Michael Rahm and John Pappas, will see a lot more USEF 10s coming down the line for other people that are going to go through that. So.
Did you say that the Dr. Go was inspired by USEF? Was he doing a similar job before that from Pennsylvania Racing and he was fired?
His job for Pennsylvania racing was similar in nature, obviously a little bit different than Youssef. I made a comment to Mr. Kessler today about, I heard, Dr. Ubo was fired. He said, no, he left to pursue other things. So, and listen, it's a corporate structure, guys, and you still have to respect that, that there are employment laws and other things that have to be put in place. But I will tell you that Paul did say to Dr. Ubo, I don't think you're going to be around in January. And he was right. Anyone else? Any other questions?
One question I have. So everybody works so hard at this, and of course we all have to thank Larry and Kelley to really get the truth out and find the facts. And the issue that I would have, and as everybody else, we all have horses and we have all the fun in the world. How do you straighten out the problem?
Again, the question is, how do you straighten out the problem? And the USEF can do what the USEF does because it's the national governing body and they have no competition. They don't have anybody to compete with them. If there was another organization out there that they had to step up, and listen, it's a tough job running something like that, but if you're going to leave it for them, then you better get or demand that the athletes and the owners start to participate in an oversight.
The second question I would have then is, everybody, as we all know, most of you will probably all be drug tested. If you're winning and all that stuff, we all get drug tested, right? So they take the vial, they put the vial wherever, and then who follows the vial? In other words, I can grab that, and I'm just talking openly, I can contaminate that blood in 3 seconds and make anybody fail.
Well, I mean, and the question is, how do we keep it from being contaminated? Listen, I always believed all these years that things were being done correctly. I mean, and when I said, let's go ahead and get the videos and stuff, people were sending me videos of the drug collection stuff on the floor. And I sent them immediately to Youssef and said, guys, I'm hurting my own clients here by even letting the gig out, but I'm going to tell you guys. And every video I shared with the Youssef a month ago, well, 3 weeks ago, whatever. I mean, Kelley was being tested and has still been tested every single day, Bay Horse Show, every day. So we have a lot of videos. Other people have shared their videos with us too. And that is why Bill Maroney put in the memo yesterday that they're going to try to do changes with the collections.
But I still have to say this. I had to prove a point, and I was mad, and I was on their side because you proved a point. How do I prove you wrong? It's easy. I grab that vial when it's leaving my stall to the lab, and it has to be transported wherever, and I do what I have to do. How do you prove I didn't do it?
We have no way to prove that.
I have another question.
Okay.
Is the vial sealed that nobody can do it?
Well, here's what should happen. As it comes out, they do put a plastic seal over. There's the rubber stopper if anyone wants to see what these tubes look like, and then they put a black kind of a plastic piece over it, and then the seal goes over that. So in a perfect world, it shouldn't, and nobody should be popping through the top of the tube or anything like that. So let me just show you here. You have to hope that people are being honest, but I don't know that they are.
Made all the decisions.
Oh, I didn't fire him. I would have fired him 6 months ago.
I know that. But they did after they realized he wasn't.
This is your tube.
I think it's the worst thing ever.
These are just the wrong tubes. I mean, they shouldn't even be collecting these tubes. I did look when I saw the memo yesterday about the Berlinger kit. It looks like it's a lot better. I think you guys will be happier with that kit. Although it still does have the green tubes in there, so I'm a little concerned about when it'll be centrifuged. But to be honest, it looks far more secure, and they're using that for what they call WADA, the World Association of Drug. So
my last question on that topic. Anyways, if we would form a group that would be able to present something to them that we're concerned. Look, I'm just a happy dad. I have a few horses. We have a great time doing it, and I think everybody's getting fed up with it. I think you've heard enough of it. Even what happened to Larry and Kelley, and say, you know what, thank God that they took the position to say, you know what, it's not fair, and you stepped up, and Paul and whoever else, and you said, you know what, no, you made it dirty. Well, they didn't make it dirty, you made it dirty. How do we protect ourselves going down the road? And I think everybody here should worry about that, because as honest as everybody is, you could be in the same situation, could be mishandled, and you would have to say, can I afford to fight them? Most of us can't afford to fight
Well,
them.
and let me just be real clear about something. We learned the information about the contamination from a tip. So,
How frightening is that, though, when you look at us, and I mean everybody, you know, we spend a lot of time in aggravation of endless nights, all the money to run down the road, and we have an organization that can say, you know, I like you, but I don't like you, and I want to put you out tomorrow, and I'm going to show you how I do it, and you can't beat me.
well,
Is that fair?
it's not fair, but there's supposed to be check places, okay? And let me do this for you. This attorney, that's the hearing panel attorney, he's supposed to give them good legal advice. And why didn't he tell that hearing panel, guys, the technicians are 3 miles down the road, they're employees, just let them come in here for 15 minutes. Why is he writing orders that are scathing people? Okay, this guy's being paid with your money, so I'd be looking there. This attorney here is paid to prosecute from Maryland, okay? He, when he got an email on July 10th saying there was a problem in the lab, should have rushed over to the lab from Maryland and said, they're saying this was contaminated and here's all the things that happened. But they didn't do that. So you gotta hope that the people that are being paid with your membership money are doing the advice they should be doing. No, you're not.
No, I am, but you know, it bothers me because it's not right. But anyways, so we have this tech that comes out and they grab you at the ring and they walk you to your stalls and they take the blood. What's the credentials? What are they really? What are they? I mean, can you hire me at Wall? Oh, I shouldn't say that. I'll take that back. Can you hire me off the street and say, yes, I know how to draw blood and I think I can do it the correct way? How do we know that that's an RN or someone licensed to draw blood the correct way? Because there is a way of, you know, doing it correctly, putting it and sealing it correctly. Are these people able to do it? Because I got to tell you this, and I hope I don't offend anybody here. I looked at some of these young ladies when I walked back with them. I got to tell you what.
Well, nobody should be pulling blood except for a licensed veterinarian, okay? So, and you know, if it's not, I'm assuming there should be nobody but a licensed veterinarian. The rules of USEF do allow you to call the show vet and ask for the show vet to be present for the blood to be pulled. The technician's job is to collect the urine and to do the sealing and things of that sort. The FEI does have a list of technicians that are go through a training process and a collection process and things of that sort. I think the issue here, in my humble opinion, is that Dr. Schumacher fell down on the job and wasn't out retraining his collecting vets out in the field to reiterate to them what they're supposed to be doing. Because back in prior to 2011, when they were using different tubes, you could freeze in those tubes. When they changed in 2011 to the new tubes, they didn't, or I'm hoping they did, but it doesn't appear that there was a lot of retraining on these tubes don't get frozen. So I don't know what their credentials are. I would hope that USEF, like stewards or licensed officials, should have a list, at least identifying that they've met with them. Anybody in a lab would have proficiency testing done once a year. USEF knew about this back in July of the problems, and they hadn't gotten out there to retrain people even as of today. And that's a little bit concerning, especially if you just hit the places like HITS, Ocala, WEF, you know, some of the bigger shows that are going on. At least get those ones to be done right. But they are a small organization, so they don't have a lot of people to rush out and fix things right away overnight. So I'm hopeful that they'll get that done quickly.
You should reference to after the testers have taken the samples and where they're supposed to go.
Okay, so Kelley's point was, because I've been harping on them, that make sure that the drug testers are taking the samples and putting them in the locked cooler that USEF provides. So they have on video asked the technicians, where are we taking the tubes? Let's go to the cooler for the video. And they said there is no cooler. We keep it in our duffel bag at the end of the day, and then we'll drive them to our office and we'll put them away. So guys, today was pretty hot. They're not putting them in a locked cooler with the dry ice. So And that just concerns me why they're in a duffel bag sitting in another barn aisle while other stuff is being pulled. But again, that's for a day that if there's a problem, we're going to have something to talk about. In the back?
Every single time that you have a horse get tested.
And the key to the
Every single thing
videotaping
they do.
is you videotape the people taking the samples. Okay, watch their hands the whole way. That's what they're doing.
When they're
Go ahead,
putting it
yeah.
on the ground
Other than
before they steal it.
videotaping, is there anything else worthwhile doing? Like, should I have my vet, if my horse is tested, should I have my vet come draw blood so we have our own sample?
Well, that has actually been asked from other people. Of my clients have asked me the same thing, and I have recommended that they get a backup blood. The problem is they're not running it fast enough in the lab at USAF. So they should be able, and I think Avery, we're going to talk about that later, but you know, the problem is if you're going to pull blood, you need to get it to the lab and get it run quickly. They're not running some of this stuff for a couple months. So I want to talk one other thing that we didn't talk about, but it's a great forum to clear the air. So I want to do this real quick. Larry and Kelley are repeat drug offenders. Wrong. Wrong, guys, wrong. It is not a hidden secret. It's on the USEF documents. Larry will tell you himself. He had in 2004, along with about 200 other people, a reserpine violation. Okay? He took his time. That he didn't use it, but hey, that's the way you said you found it. God bless you. I'm taking my time out. Kelley had one in 2003. Okay, guys? 2004, 2003. That's it. Larry had an ace chromosine. It took the USEF a year and a half to make a charge on an ace chromosine. Okay, if they were so worried about Larry Glefke being a bad guy, so let's talk about that. The horses were tying up in the trailer. One of the horses got ace chromosine. It was told to the show office. It was put on a medication form. He admitted that that's what the horse got. It was outside the time frame, but they showed some metabolites. So you know what Larry said? Whatever the penalty is, Bonnie, I take it. That's my penalty. Because I'm going to look out for my horse. We gave the USEF the trailer documents, the tow truck documents, the purchase documents for having to buy new tires because the trailer was on the side of the road. But that wasn't good enough to the hearing committee. They didn't want to believe it. That's fine. We didn't dispute, you know, that the horse got ace. So Larry had his ace chromosine. That's it, folks. That's the full extent of anything involving Larry Glefke and Kelley Farmer with the USEF with drugs and some medications. So those of you that want to continue to say they're repeat offenders, shame on you. Do your homework. So, Kathy in the back.
We went through a long time with Tommy's hearing, and they will always try to bring in a prior offense. And Tommy had one 25 years prior, and it was a client that was an outside client that met him at horse shows and gave her horse to Mosedan on a Tuesday to Clip. And he got set down for that. After that, they changed it that was an outside client. He can sign the trainers form. But the same hearing committee did his hearings last time, remembered his 25-year ago prior, and brought it into his hearing.
Right.
Which today, that wouldn't have even happened.
Well, you are correct. Thank you, Kathy. That's something all of you should be thinking about, okay? A lot of people have had a slip-up, a prior, a slap, and you took your $500 fine and you went on your merry way. Because back in the day, that's all that it was, and it was awful, but you certainly weren't going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting over your innocence when you can pay $500 and be done with it. Now, USEF doesn't have a limitation on priors. So if you have a prior from 17 years ago, 18 years ago, whatever it is, as it stands today, that can be used against you. Well, that's a problem because you may have agreed to something just for the sake of the ease of it. We have been told that there are rules being suggested to follow the FEI priors to, I think it was 8 years or 10 years, that they were going to try to put that forward and ask the USEF to honor those priors, which would be great. The problem is this, though, as a lawyer. When I asked the USEF to do a second phase penalty for Larry and Kelley, what I meant by that is if the hearing panel finds that they're violating the drug rule, then we come back and we talk about mitigating and aggravating factors. And USEF said, piss off. Well, that's a problem, folks, because I had to argue to the hearing committee the priors in order to let them know, because the only way they find out about the priors is in the back room. And the problem with that is the rules say the hearing committee has to take the evidence from the corners of the room. So when they're taking information in the back room in deliberations from some unknown place, they're bringing in evidence outside of the record, and we have no way to control that. So I had the unfortunate task to have to plead my case here that they didn't have this violation and then talk about these prior violations. And, you know, that's why in a criminal court, we're not allowed to talk about priors, because if somebody touched somebody wrong before and they're being charged with touching someone wrong today, and you bring that up, your thought process is they must be guilty here. And that's why you don't want that to be in a hearing committee, because the hearing committee shouldn't have to listen to that. They should just listen to the case in front of them. That's just a fallacy with the rules, unfortunately, and unless you guys change that, you're stuck with it. New York courts don't go past 10 years for priors. I have represented some people in the last 2 years that forgot they had priors 17 years ago. And so when the USAF brought it up, I was like, oh, well, you know. So my point is it's not real fair, but, you know, that's your job to have to help change that rule.
How would you feel about a hearing committee if you go there for the GABA thing, all right? They never charge Kelley Farmer with anything else. When you get the results from the first one, we were going there, Kelley's getting a year and I'm getting 2 years. They added 6 years because Kelley was riding horses for people.
6 months.
Come on, guys. What in the world would a hearing committee do when you're not charged with something? They walk in and then they're going to add 6 more months to Kelley's thing? Come on.
And Larry's point is a good point, and that's something that you really need to think about.
Wait a minute. This is my turn now. We have no regulatory people at the top of this association, guys. You've got to look to the top of it. What people are doing to us at the top of us, they've made us for the last 10 or 15 years like we're all thieves, we're all cheats, we're all doing something drastically wrong. We have nothing like the jockeys do. We have no HPBA. We have nothing to go back at them with. You sit in that hearing committee. The man who's running the hearing committee, basically a lawyer himself, is telling them what they want to hear. Dr. Schumacher is sitting there telling you that he's already got a case and he's been told what you've done wrong, right? You don't have a chance out. Their lawyer is unscathed with any form of having to follow the law, and you're sitting there and you go, but that's not true, but that's not true. And then their way of representing, because you fought at all and asked for another hearing, is to give your girlfriend 6 more months so that they're going to fight it harder and shut the hell up, or we're going to make it worse on you. I don't care what anybody else says. There's something wrong with that, guys. There's something wrong at the top of our association if that is allowed to happen in that hearing committee. All right? I'm sorry. But that's wrong, guys. It's wrong.
One of the things that people don't realize with the rules that Larry's talking about, how many people here do their business with their husband and wife? Husband and wives. Any husbands and wives do business together? Okay. How many people here do business with what you might call a significant other?
That would be me.
Okay. The rules technically say if your companion is set down, you're set down. That's technically what the rules say. The rules say, and that's a weird rule. The USAF hasn't punished people too much on that, but they could, and it's a rule I don't know why you all haven't, especially with domestic partnership and things. That would be the first place I would be hitting, is that rule to say, you know, you can't throw us out of business entirely. One has to do business, one has to do the other. Yeah.
Even my daughter?
Yeah.
Wow. How long is that?
I don't know, it's been there for years. I mean, it's been there probably since the 404 rule came in 3 or 4 years ago.
That's wrong. If your name is you down as trainer, then your blanket should be just you. I mean, that's just wrong.
It's a battle for a lot of people to have, and the rule is there though, so you really should be looking at that rule, because you know the issue is, and one of the things the hearing committee in our case made the presumption that Kelley was secreting Larry's horses, when in reality it had nothing to do with that. And the person who made the chart, which we proved in the arbitration, the person who made the chart for the hearing committee to follow didn't follow the correct chart, because what they did is said, oh no, Kelley took over these horses. All they took was the stable chart. Those horses never horse showed on the horse show grounds. They just had a dry stall that if they ever wanted to use it, it was just happened to be that horse's name. So the person who put the chart together isn't a horse show person, and it took us about a millisecond to realize that that was wrong, but you know, we didn't know because that was put into evidence behind the deliberation doors. So.
Until the arbitrator, they never dropped that charge. That was absurd.
Yes.
Kelley getting the extra 6 months.
They never dropped that charge until this all ended.
Well, that's what I just said.
Right. Okay, Michael, do you have something?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Michael Rahm. I'm one of the lawyers that was on this case. The question you guys had, okay, the question you all had was, how do we protect ourselves from this? This case dealt primarily with looking at what was the process of getting the evidence and why was all of that evidence no good. And we did an investigation. We found out that the lab produced bad evidence, and that's how we got Larry and Kelley back in the ring. The way to protect yourself is to look at the other half of the process, which is the hearing process. No matter what we do to investigate all of this evidence, when you walk in that hearing room, you're going to lose. That's it. Nobody wins in the hearing room. I tell my clients, if you want to win, you got to go to the next level. And there's 2 ways to go to a next level. You can either go to the next level at the United States Olympic Committee and say, I want to have the entire hearing process reviewed to see if I can get some panel to change what happened and look at what was done in the first hearing and maybe rule something different that maybe they shouldn't have lost. That's called a 9. That's what we did. That was the whole process. This was a USOC 9. And it was the arbitration that went and followed that. We tried to fix the process, the hearing process, because you lose if you go there. So how do you fix it? You can go and tell the USOC that you want to file a 10 and explain to the USOC that one of its members, the USEF is a member of the USOC. Every sport has one member, the Tennis Association, USEF. Each sport gets one member that belongs to the USOC. And you try to tell them that the USEF is not following its rules. Before you can go to the USOC and tell them this, you have to first bring the argument to the USEF itself. So we went to 10 because we didn't think we were going to get anywhere with the USEF. We went to the USOC, and they basically said, well, you came too soon, go back and go to the USEF and explain to the USEF that they're not following their rules, that they're not giving you the documents, that the hearing process there is fixed, that the panel is biased, that they have the lawyers in the room, that they're giving people evidence after the hearing in the back room that nobody ever got to see. You can go and you can bring the same 10 hearing before the USEF. You want to protect yourselves? Everybody's got to get together, join in, file a USEF 10, and complain to the USEF, that the USEF is not following its own rules. What are they going to do? you're going to lose that one, right? Right, yeah, you're going to lose it. But just like we showed them that the lab process was wrong and now they're going to fix it, if we go to the USAF and we complain that they're not following their rules, then we can go to the United States Olympic Committee, and then we can start telling them. And at that point, we get an arbitrator, and we get somebody from the outside who will tell us that we can start looking at the documents. And at that point, maybe the USAF will do the same thing that it's doing now for the first half of the process. Now they're fixing the laboratory and the collection of evidence. If you want to fix the hearing process, that's what we have to do that. And that's how you protect yourself.
They still have to start at the top. You understand these people knew months ago that they had a flawed litigation. Flawed beyond, but do you know how much money we as members, I was paying on both sides. I was paying as a member, and I'm paying these people to do it, and Bonnie will swear to God to you this is the truth. I said, I don't care. As long, I will keep spending this money as long as when it's all through, this comes out to the membership, because everybody needs to know this. There's a huge flaw at the top that allowed this to happen. My lawyers, and I'm sure I'm going to get in a world of trouble for this, my lawyers, they came to visit my lawyers 60 days before this happened, and they said they came down to make a deal, right? They knew they'd done wrong, but they took the chance because the arbitrator had ruled against me the first time that they'd never lost in court before, and they were going to take this chance again. There's a huge flaw at the top. I guarantee you they spent $700,000 or $800,000 of our money to do this when they knew they were wrong, guys. There's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with an association that will allow this to happen. Fine, get whatever. They're going to do whatever they want to me anyways, and they're probably going to get me again. But the only reason I did this is it's wrong that they did to Kelley what they did to her. If I'm the bad guy, if I'm going to be the bad guy, I've never said I was polyburopred. I don't want to be a role model for any of your goddamn kids. But let me tell you something, all right? I work really hard at what I do, and it's wrong. It's flawed at the top, guys. It's flawed at the top. I don't care what y'all want to say. Somebody's got to do something about it and stop it. It's wrong. For this point forward.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you, Larry. That's great, really. Thank you. No, I mean that. I love you, man. Quiet. I love you, man. Listen, two things. First of all, most importantly, that food's over there is for you. So we're going to finish here in a couple of minutes. We're going to hang around if you have other questions. But let me just go back to one point, because I think you guys are getting sucked in a little bit. USAF puts out these great statements about we're going to correct things. And they talk about the independent consultants. I don't know who they are. I don't know how independent they are, but you've seen other organizations that rot on the inside. I'm not saying USAF is rotten, I'm saying other organizations. And if they try to examine and study themselves, you always worry about that. The outside review has got to be truly independent, number one. Number two, the documents that Mr. Kessler and Mr. Maroney put out talk about focusing the inquiry on the Laboratory Strategic Planning Task Force. Okay, that's getting new bottles and a new manager, and that's real nice. All very important. But something, and this goes back, I actually agree with this guy over here in the blue shirt. You got problems that go a lot deeper than your laboratory. And the only way to make the system run better and fairer for you is by getting in there, getting in the face of the people at the top, and get the organization running fairly for its members. I think this is a good organization from what I gather in general, but this part of it got some real problems when it gets to the regulation. So don't get sucked into, oh, we're fixing everything because we have a lab program. Remember what they said, this was an isolated problem, we're going to fix it. They're talking laboratory. This problem goes a lot deeper. If you have any questions about that, Larry will fill you in later, okay?
How do you go about that? I mean, we're nobodies. We go to the convention and we vote for things, and we come back.
Well,
you got to trust the people at the top. You got to trust the people at the top. If the Susie Shellcops don't know about it and they're lying to the Susie Shellcops, they're lying to everybody, guys. Okay?
To make a change.
There has to be a change.
I guess we need some guidance on how, as members, we would go about getting this change to happen.
It's something we all got to talk about.